I thought it would be kind of fun. I realized that due to COVID, many of you may not have had the in-person experience yet. So I thought maybe I could give this presentation as if we were in person. So then I realized this is a little hard to read, might be a little hard to pay attention, which is actually almost accurate if you're sitting at the back of a room in person. But we're gonna go ahead with the regular screen size. So again, I'm doing this through my camera, so you're gonna wanna make that full size instead of a screen share. And just let me know if there's any problems with that. So as Phil said, I'm a recent graduate from my Master's of Applied Science. As well, I have my Bachelor's in Mechanical Engineering. My research was focused on computational fluid dynamics in the field of renewable energy, and especially in geoexchange. I have experience working as a mechanical engineering consultant as well. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Umny Inc, which is a company that builds machine learning tools for engineers and designers in the renewable energy field. So let's get into this presentation. The presentation that I'm giving to you today is about how to design for and with women, so specifically focusing on the topic of women. When we look into this topic, the very first thing that comes to mind is how we think about women. This is what governs and decides how we design for women, so we need to start there. When we start with how we think about women in the design process, I, several years ago, did a research project on reports in this class, and I tried to quantify and qualify, with the help of several professors and organizations in the university, what kind of thinking about women was going on during this design process. Right off the bat, we found that there was a really noticeable emphasis on positive descriptions being used for male personas, or personas that were described as being men. It was 86% more common for a positive description to be used for men than it was for them to be used for a woman. So men were very commonly described as being intelligent and dedicated, patient and strong. The opposite was true for women. We found that it was 76% more common for a negative descriptor to be used for a woman than it would be for a male persona. So women were often described as being weak, lazy, nagging, and unprepared. Clearly, there was a gender-based bias here in the thinking of how these personas were being written, and that was going to lead to affecting the design process. So why does it matter? If we're starting with this simplistic or biased viewpoint about men and women and the positive and the negative descriptions associated with each, along with several other biases that we noticed, this ends up affecting the final design. So part of the ways that it can affect the design is from excluding the users from these design populations. When women are described as being weak, we can assume or we can pretend that they may not exist in certain design scenarios where strength is required. And in that case, we might actually be missing women that are there. As well, we end up overemphasizing characteristics that are not actually that present. So this is very common with gender-based design, where everything turns pink because it's for women. We're overemphasizing this one feature, and we assume that that is the most important characteristic in the design criteria. As well, we may miss characteristics that are actually important. Features such as age and ability, which are not gender-based, might be missed because we're focusing on our biased views about women versus men, for example. But ultimately, this really matters because we're not reflecting respect or representation to our users. And this can be seen through the design. The users can tell, and it's really a problem that we need to address in engineering. The easiest tip, and the most obvious one for me, on how to design for women is to actually let women design for themselves. This is really goes back to the idea that there's nothing about us without us. The lived experiences of a person in a group are the best and most accurate information you can get about what that group needs. So when we look for where the women in design are, and I'm focusing on engineering here, we see that there is low representation of women across, especially mechanical engineering. So in the student population in Canada, there was only 14% of the women that were the students in mechanical, software, and computer engineering. And in our professors, 12% were professors, and only 7% of those were full professors were women in Canada. In the industry, this percentage is also low. So 12% of the licensed engineers in Canada are women. And so we know that there is obviously not a lot of women who are engaging in this design process throughout studying and working in the field. But of course, there are many programs that are aiming to increase this amount. Most of the governing bodies that we work under have a mission to increase the amount of women. This is commonly called 30 by 30, where the idea is that by 2030, we'll have 30% women in licensed engineering fields. I think, this year is coming up, so I hope that this is moving quickly, because that is a high goal, and I really hope that we get there or further. The point is that women are in the design process. We do exist in the field, and we will continue to be, if not in greater numbers. But what are the conditions like for women in school and work? Are we able to contribute to the design process? Are there barriers and limitations? So you may expect where this is going. There has been well-documented and studied limitations to the women that are in this program, partly because there are so few, but also due to a larger culture that is sometimes anti-women in engineering. So one of these studies, which was done by the Ontario Society of Professional Engineers, found that 1 in 4 women who are working in the field experienced discrimination, harassment, or bullying. 1 in 3 of them were paid less than men that were working the same job. And 1 in 2 felt disrespected on the job. In America, out of the women who are licensed engineers, 52% of them had experienced sexual harassment while they were at work. And this was leading to a 40% dropout, or women who had never even started the profession because they had experienced this beforehand and they did not want to handle it. It's not entirely the reason why 40% of the women leave the profession, but it is a major factor in this reason, and I think it's something that we need to talk about right away, because this is a major issue, and it's the highest dropout rate of any profession for doctors, lawyers, the professional engineering, the professional careers. So there's 52% of women that are experiencing sexual harassment, and 40% are saying, I've had enough, I'm out of here. I think we can solve this. I think we can fix this. We need to look at this problem, because it's obvious that the conditions are harsh. And if we want to design for women, we need to encourage women to be able to be in the design process. What we're talking about right now is added forces for those that are different. And these are the added forces which may push someone out of the field. Some of these added forces are exclusion from dominant culture. So knowing that we don't belong, or there are not many people like us, can add a pressure that makes us that makes us feel alone, makes us feel isolated. As well, there's intersectional challenges. Beyond just being a woman, we may feel pressure from being a minority or a marginalized group in other areas of our identity. Issues of race, gender identity, sexuality, economic background, socio-background, etc. Societal and cultural norms can also add pressure. These are the rules which decide how we feel we should be, and the pressures of who we believe we should become. As well, there's well-documented misogyny, sexism, assault, and worse, that is a force on many women in the field. And this is all in addition to the difficulty of the field. So what this means, if you can see my free body diagram here, the effort that is required just to balance, just to survive and maintain equilibrium in the field is very high, because you have to overcome additional forces just by being a woman or by having these other marginalized identities. I believe that equal opportunity would remove many or all of those forces. I think that the difficulty of our field should match the effort, the ability, and the motivation that we put in, so that we all are on equal footing. And this is what I hope for everyone. So that brings me to how to design with women. How can we remove some of those forces? Of course, it goes back to how we're thinking about women. When we are designing with them, our behaviors and our actions come from our thoughts and our beliefs about women that we're working with. And so that's where we need to look. That's where we're going to start. So to do this research, I looked predominantly on social media to try and figure out, or try to express the culture of engineering and how it might think about women in certain cases. So this was taken from popular Instagram accounts, and they are sexualized content. So please be aware this is sexualized images. But there were several common themes that I found through these memes about women. And this one was that women in engineering are ugly, manly, unlikable. They do not belong or exist. And they are often heavily sexualized and objectified. When we look at articles and actions meant to address this issue, often we find in the comments and in the reactions some really good information about what some men in engineering think about women in the field. So here, after just a quick search, I found these two comments where these men were willing to admit that the women that at their work, all of them are really terrible at their job. As well, and this is a very common one, there's a belief that women don't want to do engineering. That's why we're not here. This one is always a little bit funny to me because it is strange to have someone say to you that they know what you want to do with your life versus what you know you want to do with your life. But for some reason, this is a common thought that I've encountered several times. As well, there is the idea that because we're focusing on this and because we talk about it, this means that women who are in engineering are getting insane advantages for their identity. This is also expressed through the belief that anything a woman in engineering does achieve is achieved purely because she's a woman, purely because of her identity. And it leads some men or other identities to feel bitter against the women in engineering, or feel like they are at a disadvantage in comparison. So these kinds of thoughts about women and the behavior that it enables can make it very harsh and very difficult for some women in this field. Of course, it doesn't happen in all cases, and of course, these kinds of attitudes can affect people that are not just women. But I really think that we need to start to talk about this, because that's how we're going to solve it, and that's how we can move forward to design with women. And to talk about this, I want to make it a little more personal. So I'm going to describe some of the things that I experienced while I was working, throughout many years working and studying in engineering. And then I want to describe the effect that that could have. So this is sort of a case study on myself. These are some of the direct quotes that I experienced while I was studying and working. This case in particular, I was on my way to receive 2 awards that I was extremely proud to get. One was for entrepreneurship and leadership, and the other was for thermodynamics or thermofluids, the fields that I am most focused on, the areas of work in engineering that I do my hardest work in. So I was really proud, really excited. And on my way, my good friend came up to me and he said, "Oh, you must have got the Girl Award," before ever hearing anything about what I had won. And this kind of comment immediately made me wonder if my true achievements were because of my skill, or if I was getting, or if it was believed that I was getting these achievements just because of my identity. And it really had a negative effect on my confidence and my ability to feel accomplishment in my accomplishments throughout my career. The rest of these I don't want to say out loud, so you're going to have to read them. I'm sorry. But I just want to describe how intense it can be to experience direct hostility while you're also trying to focus and work and do your best and have your career development. It really adds a lot of pressure. It can have a serious health impact as well. It can make you exhausted and burnt out. So needless to say, the experience of these and many other things, which I won't discuss here, they pushed me to that point that 40% of the women in America had gotten to, where I felt that the field of engineering didn't want me, I didn't belong in it, and there would be no point for me to continue to work so hard and put so much effort into it if I wasn't going to be able to feel safe or supported or celebrated in my field. So I did feel like quitting, I admit it, and there are many, many women around you, above you, that you will work for, that will work for you, who may get to this point, who may feel this much hostility. It's unfortunately very common, and it has a huge impact on our relationships, on our health, and on our career. Sexism in engineering can have a really big impact, and I think we need to acknowledge that, and we need to admit it. But the good news is that we can reduce it. This is what I have learned throughout my career, and this is something that brings me hope. So when I've seen, or when I've gone to discussions on women in engineering in the past, and even my own discussion just now, where we see the statistics and we see the messaging, it can get quite discouraging if you're a woman in engineering. Seeing these messages, it feels like, what is the hope? Where are we going? And why is it so bad, But this is how I visualize it now, that it's a small section of the field which is the source of this negative thinking about women. It's actually not the whole field. Unfortunately, the small section of the field has a very loud impact on the culture sometimes, and especially if we are in a workplace that is toxic, this can have it can overcome the whole workplace. But we can find a way to leave that behind while still staying in engineering. This is about building our own space. So this is how I found hope. And of course, this is not what I expect every woman in engineering to do, but I found hope by co-founding a company with Sylvie, who has a PhD in mechanical engineering and is an expert on many amazing things. And we have found a way that we can build our own space. So we work in the field of geoscience, mechanical engineering, and software development, which are the three of the most male-dominated industries, at least in North America. And we build our own space by deciding and creating boundaries around who we work for. Where we're doing this engineering work is chosen very intentionally, so that we are not engaging in the negative thinking about women. And we have this choice. We have this power as engineers, regardless of the place that you're working in and of your position. We do have some power to have a say over no longer experiencing that. And we found that it's really empowering. It's actually quite enjoyable. There are many, many, many engineers, male, older, younger, and all sorts of identities you will work with who are extremely respectful and make the experience really enjoyable. This is how I found hope. In spite of the negativity that is often associated with being a woman in engineering, there's a lot of positivity. And the reason for this is because engineering itself is changing. Our field requires us to update and stay on continuous learning. We always have to stay up to date. Part of this updating process, this change, this evolution, is to become more inclusive and respectful. This is very important for the field of engineering, and it will only become more important. So it's really a good idea for all of us to learn how to continue to do this, how to continue to update our own biases, and how to be more inclusive. This has a really positive impact on the design. So when we're designing from respect, we end up being able to include new users in the design population. And this is because we are being more inclusive of the new users and the new designers in our own teams. So by being more inclusive, we open up our creativity and we open up the range of people that we can reach with our designs. As well, we can discover new design criteria and be more creative and more innovative. When we are working with people who have different lived experiences than ours, we can often think of things together that we had never thought of before. It's really about creativity, and I think that this is where the next phase of innovation in engineering comes from. It comes from being more inclusive and more diverse in our design teams. As well, we can finally focus on the characteristics that are actually important, on the chronic issues that our users have been hoping for us to solve that we maybe haven't seen yet. So this is a way for us to finally address the problems and to make really, really good designs that our users actually want. But most importantly, when we are using respect in our design team and our products and our designs reflect that respect. We are representing the actual society that we serve, and we are contributing really good engineering work when we do it in a respectful way. So the summary is that I believe when we are working well with our team, that's how we make really good engineering products. That's how we make really good design decisions. So here's some quick tips on how to achieve that positive work environment with lots of respect and lots of inclusion. There are many more, and I'm hoping that in our discussion we can come up with more ideas. I don't want to do all the work, but some of the tips that I have is to not make judgments or assumptions without evidence. And this is really true both for the personas that you are describing, the users in your user group, and also for the users in your team, the people that you are designing with. When we make judgments or assumptions without evidence, we can sometimes make really incorrect assumptions. One of the examples that always makes me laugh a little bit was a persona I read once who was a 16-year-old woman who was extremely fit, went to the gym every day, super healthy, but the designers felt that even though she was super healthy, no ability issues at all, she wouldn't be able to lift a watermelon on her own. This, for anyone who knows what a healthy 16-year-old person can lift, is a little silly. It shows that there wasn't enough evidence taking in the process to, and an assumption was more relied on than actual evidence to make this judgment. As well, when we're working with our colleagues, we never want to assume or judge anything about them. You wouldn't want anyone to assume anything about you, neither do I. We've got to learn who we are before we start to make assumptions about our capabilities, about our life, and about our personalities. The next tip is really important. Don't sexualize or stereotype the women that you work and study with. As soon as we add that layer, it just immediately starts to exclude women. So there are cases where you can have social life, and this can happen, this can overlap very often with work and school, but you should go into all of your interactions first without that. First separate them if you're getting business cards or contact information through your groups, through your work, and you want to use that to ask someone out on a date, for example. I suggest that you be very kind and very considerate when you think of doing that. And the best way that you can do that is by asking those women, do you want or am I able to use this contact information for other reasons outside of engineering? Does that make you comfortable? Is that okay? Otherwise, the best bet is to just not come in with a sexualized tone or attitude when you're working with women. Just treat them like everyone else. And the last don't is don't be a gatekeeper. So we all have justifiable reasons why and why we believe certain engineers make better engineers than others. But we are not actually the ones who decide this. The field of engineering itself, the physics, the work, the effort, all of that will decide who makes a good engineer, and that is up to each of us to prove ourselves in our field. We don't have to be the gate. So when someone says they're interested in engineering, we have to believe them, and we have no reason not to. It really helps our field if we allow anyone in, regardless of what they look like, what their identity is, and wait and see. Can you make a good engineer? Let's find out. When we're talking about the positives, the things that I think we should do to make this good working environment, it's really important to be consistent, professional, and respectful in our treatment of others. Once we reach this level of emotional intelligence, working on our communication skills, being really positive and respectful whenever we're interacting with people, regardless of our job or our position, this is when we become really powerful as engineers. This is when people want to work with us, and this is when we start to realize the potential of what we can do in this field. It is also important to treat everyone as our equal. The people we work for, the people that work for us, are all our equals. We just have different job titles. It is especially important to treat the women that you work with as your equal. We are all equals. And the last thing that I think we need to do more of, which is probably the most important thing, is to stand up for our colleagues whenever we witness harassment. A colleague or a student who is experiencing harassment is feeling extremely alone. They are concerned about losing their position, their money, their career, their relationships, their reputation. It's a really difficult situation to be in. And once we stand up for them and once we support them, we immediately lessen the load on that person, and we help to keep them included. We help to remind them that they do belong here because we are willing to stand up for them, and we are willing to talk openly about the issues that we all may see at some point in our careers. So an example, going back to that case where I said my friend told me I got the Girl Award, after several days of working up the courage, I finally approached him and I said, it didn't make me feel comfortable. It didn't make me feel good when you said that. It made me wonder if you think everything that I do, I only get the achievements for because of my identity. And it really ruined my night, to hear that from you. And it was really hard for me to say that. I don't like confrontation. It was uncomfortable for us both. But because I was willing to discuss it and call it out openly, we immediately could resolve the issue. Of course, that wasn't his intention, and once I explained it, he was immediately apologetic. He did not mean to give that impression to me or to make me feel that way, and we both learned a bit, in the process of discussing it. So I think that is our individual power, regardless of our position within the field. We have the individual power of talking about these issues out loud, and when we are safe to do so, that's when we can start to change the entire culture. Here's some more information. Inferior by Angela Saini, who's also in mechanical engineering, is an excellent book. It has really good resources and references to continue reading through. As well, your professors and I did work on this paper if you want some more information about the details of our study. And that's everything that I have for my presentation. I want to thank you all for listening. I know that it can be a difficult conversation to listen to, and so I really appreciate you being here, listening, and being respectful. And I also am really appreciative that you are contributing to the future of engineering. You have a lot of power, and I'm excited to see how you use this power.